Welcome to the Course Creators Academy podcast with digital design and course creation expert, Pua Lena. Tune in for strategies on how you can use online courses to grow your business. You'll hear how impact-driven entrepreneurs are using online courses to transform lives. Now, let's get started. Here's your host, Pua Lena.
What's up, course creators? I'm so excited for you to hear the second part of my conversation with Paul and Larsen. We are going to continue our conversation about imposter syndrome, getting comfortable with getting uncomfortable so that you can experience growth in your business and your life, and really integrating support into your business so that you can hold yourself accountable for really experiencing that growth that you desire and absolutely deserve. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Gosh, that is so brilliant. And it's so comforting to hear. Like, if I were to introduce you or meet you and be introduced to you as, like, let's say somebody was like, this is Paul. He is a leadership, imposter syndrome and perfectionism expert. I'd be like, oh my gosh, well, this guy must be perfect. He must know exactly how to navigate this world. And it's so comforting to hear that you most likely do this work because you've experienced it to the point where you're like, okay, I need to know how to grow. And here are these thoughts and feelings. How do I do that? Okay, this is how I've done it. Now, how do I teach others from my experience? So I'm really curious, is there a specific moment or opportunity or experience that comes to you when you think about, like, maybe not like the first time you ever sort of thought about having imposter syndrome or any of this and moving through it anyway. But what examples do you have in times where you were like almost not going to do it? You're like, oh my God, this is not for you, Paul. I'm out. And then you're like, you know what? Let's do it anyway.
Yeah. So a couple things come to mind on that. We all have those moments. It's a matter if we're aware of those moments, if we're available for those moments, and if we're going to be awake for those moments. So the 3 A's: aware, available, and awake. They don't have to always be in that order. They can happen in any of those orders. It's and usually when the pain of where we are gets so great that it is greater than the pain of moving forward, that's usually when something happens. That's usually when we hit we talk about this all the time sometimes, right? In life, we hit that proverbial wall. And I've got to make a change. It could be a relationship that we have to get in or get out of. It could be a career that we've got to get in or get out of. It could be anything in our life where the pain of staying where we are is so much greater than the pain of the change if we moved. And that's usually when that happens. That happens at all different times. For me, one of those pains was a June day in 2009. I remember it as if it's like yesterday. I was sitting in a church, as most people do in June. Anyway, I was sitting in a church, and I was listening to people get up, and they were getting up in front of the church, and they were taking a microphone, and they were talking about my father because it was my father's memorial service, right? And he was a wonderful man. He had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful life. So all these people are getting up and they're like, I remember, my dad's name was Alf, A-L-F, good Norwegian name. I remember Alf as a neighbor 50 years ago. He did this for me. And I remember Alf when he was doing this, and somebody else would get up and say, oh, I remember Captain Alf, because he was an airline pilot. And he was just wonderful. And he would treat us all with respect. And these people were just talking about the legacy that my father had built in his life. And it was like one person after another. And it was just like, wow. And it was beautiful. And I knew that because my dad was a wonderful, beautiful man. So it wasn't surprising to me to hear all that. Here's what happened. The wall. I hit the wall, and it came crashing down in that memorial service, probably because, losing a parent, losing your dad. There's some vulnerability there. You're maybe a little bit more vulnerable in that kind of moment. So the wall just kind of crumbled. And what happened, Pua, was I thought to myself, what are they going to say about me?
Mm.
Here they were. People were extolling the virtues of my father, which was all just incredible. And then I said, oh my gosh, what are they going to say when I go? What are people going to be saying at my memorial service, which hopefully will be decades and decades in the future. But they're going to pick up a microphone. What are they going to do? What are they going to say? Paul helped me with my HR reports. Paul helped me hire a couple hundred people. Paul helped me lay off a few hundred people. Paul helped me develop compensation plans at work because I was in human resources. And I literally was sitting there thinking, oh my God, oh my God, it's all about my work. It's all about sort of what I do at work, which I was good at. As in terms of the vision I had in my head about what people were saying about me was all good, but it was like, oh my God, that's not what I want to be known for. I have so much more to give. I have another message to get out. I don't know what it is, but I have so much more to do. And it was like I was sitting in the church pew, right? And it was like I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? I was like sitting there, like it was so spellbinding to me that it just kind of like was in a love punch to my stomach. And I realized in that moment, to your point, that's exactly when I said, I have a decision to make. Do I stay where I'm at in kind of a nice, comfortable area? I was working at an incredible company. It was called Adobe Technology. Everyone knows Adobe software. Adobe, great company, great people, great products. It had nothing to do with the company, but I was not passionate. I was not engaged. I was not, it wasn't what, but I could have stayed there the rest of my life and I would have had a very, 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 very comfortable, more than comfortable life. But it was like, oh my gosh, I've got to go out and do something. And I wasn't quite sure what that was. And I knew I had a message. I knew I had something to do. And I knew I had a new journey to start. And you want to talk about scary? It wasn't even a journey to continue. It was a journey to start. And this was back in 2009. And I, to be honest, I wasn't even young back in 2009, And I'm like thinking about starting a new journey, but then I thought, what if I don't? What if I don't? And I realized at that time, I had, like I said, decision to make. And I thought, what's the worst that can happen? What's the absolute worst that can happen? I thought, okay, I could go out, leave my job, make a complete fool of myself in front of, I don't know how many people, or maybe one person, I don't know. And kind of fail at what I do and then learn from that. And I could always go back and get a job. I can go get a job somewhere. I knew I could do any kind of work. I have no problem doing any kind of work. So I thought, if that's the worst, it was like a revelation to me. Why wouldn't I try it? Why wouldn't I go out and try something that I wanted to do? And that became right there when the wall came down for me, because the pain of staying where I was going to be greater than the pain of trying something new. And all my voices in my head, of which I had quite a few, as we all do, were all on cassette, 8-track, streaming, you name it, CDs. And they're just all like, are you nuts? It's 2009. The economy was still, we had just gone through the 2008 stuff. 2009 was still, are you crazy? Didn't matter. I didn't do it with a rash decision. I made some fundamental, I prepared and I took some time, but within about 6 months, it was time to do that. And I just kept taking the baby steps necessary to say, this is what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And that led me to kind of find my voice. At the time, I didn't know Find Your Voice was going to be my brand and my tagline, but I ended up journeying on that Find Your Voice kind of road. That became the book that came out about 5 years after that. And it just became sort of my story that's still unfolding today. It doesn't end. There is no destination. It's an ongoing thing. And we have this, In today's world, we have this need to have a destination all the time. I have to get there. And it's called get there-itis. It's actually it's a very true kind of syndrome, get there-itis. No matter what, we're going to get there. And my dad, I mentioned my dad was an airline pilot. And one of the biggest causes of airline accidents is when the pilots have this get there-itis. And no matter what they do, they're going to land the plane or take off the plane, and they're going to ignore anything else that could be happening because they have to get there. They're going to land because they're only a few hundred feet from the ground. So they're just going to go right forward and land, even though the environment might be saying, don't land right now, divert. Even though the plane might be saying, you've got something going on here, check this out. No, we're almost there. We're almost there. We're almost there. And there have been incredibly studies done with pilots that have this get there-itis that forces them into this kind of myopic vision. Same holds true for us. We have get there-itis because if you look at today's world, everyone is to us. A lot of our people we look at are all there, and so I got to get there. I just have to get where they're at. I have to get my course there. I have to get to the Kajabi Hero $100,000. I got to get there. And in fact, if anyone will tell you, it's the journey. The journey of what you and I've talked about in this whole thing today and about our relationship is all about the journey. It hasn't necessarily been about the destination at all. It's about our connection and the journey and who we meet and how we learn from each other. So that to me was probably the pivotal moment. And again, I was available to hear it. I was awake to hear it. And I was aware enough to understand. And I didn't have all the answers. And I all I knew is I had to take one or two steps, but I didn't have the next 20 steps outlined. All I had was like one or two steps, then the next two steps and the next two steps, which brings me to where I'm at today, talking to you in in the year that we're at, going into this beautiful, new year.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. There's so many things that you said that just really resonate, I hope, with so many people listening, and that whole get there-itis. Like, okay, first I do want to ask, like, this was clearly a pivotal moment where all of the awareness around just moving towards a direction that feels more in alignment with where you want to be. Mm-hmm. Did you find that saying yes to that and taking the actions to move towards that did you find any momentum where you were like, okay, I did this. I did the thing. I left the job. I did whatever the next step was, whether it was signing up for a website or, whatever that next step was for you. And then were you consciously aware of every time you took a little action after that? And you're like, okay, I hear the voices, but I'm just going to take this little action. Or, what was that journey like after that big moment?
Yeah, oh my gosh, that is a great, you're taking me back to those moments, right? And still today to those moments, although those moments become a little easier because I'm on that constant journey. But you're absolutely right. So yes, I became very aware, and I became very acute at really listening to what I thought was appropriate or not. So the universe, whatever we believe in, faith, whatever our belief in, will always test us. So when I left Adobe, immediately within I would say just a couple of weeks, I started getting tons of opportunity to come work at this company or that company in the same kind of role. And you want to tell me that it wasn't like, oh, well, maybe I should go look at that company because they are a little bit different. And, they're kind of cool. Or this company over here, wow, they're big in search and they're doing all this great stuff. And all of a sudden, and then I said, wait a minute. That's my comfort. That's all my voices. That's even my imposter saying, you don't belong out here in this area, which is like a big meadow where there's nobody around. You need to go back with your tribe, which is in the corporate world with all of these folks that are come in and work from 8 to 6 and do their job and da, 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 da. That's where you belong, Paul. So that's where you need to go. You can leave Adobe if you want, but you need to go to another company. That's what my voices were saying. So you're absolutely right. I had to not only were we tested, but not only was I tested, but I had to really look and say, no, I have to sit in this uncomfortable state. In coaching, we call it getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that ain't a tagline I don't think anyone's going to have on their license plate or on their bumper sticker. I don't even know if people keep bumper stickers anymore on cars, but you see bumper stickers. It really isn't, like who wants to like get comfortable being uncomfortable. But that's what you kind of have to do. You have to get into this kind of ease of being uneasy. And I said to myself, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I don't want to live my life in constant turmoil and always kind of in this mode. Let's just like give myself a certain amount of time. And this is something people can do in terms of the relative ease of it. So I said, I'm going to give myself a good 12 months for this. And so by doing that, it kind of subsided the voices a bit. And before I knew it, the 12 months passed. I didn't even like knew the 12 months had passed. It wasn't like I was keeping like any kind of check, because by the time I got to the 12 months later on, I was already taking the steps and getting a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable. That the next steps would be a little bit bigger. Still all baby steps, because we don't make usually large changes don't stick. So these are little baby steps. But you get more comfortable with that, and then you find more support. I found, like you and I have been talking, I found people like myself that were doing the same thing. I reached out to people. I talk about vulnerability. I'd say, help me. I really have no clue what I'm doing. I think I'm kind of doing this, and people are more than welcome. It's more than happy. Here's Paul. Here's what I did. Here's what you should do. Da, 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 da. And, one of the biggest pieces of advice I got when I left and went on to my own and kind of opened my own, hung out the shingle right on my own business. People said, forget website, forget everything else, get clients. And, it is so easy to say, oh, no, I need a website. And today it's like, oh, no, you got to have a Facebook page. You got to be on TikTok. You got to do this. You got to do it. Oh, you get all that done. Oh, get all your marketing stuff done. Da, da, da. And then they have a beautiful brand, but they have no clients. So one of the first things people said, and you're shaking your head because you know exactly it, get clients.
Yes.
And that's what I did.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for saying that. It's so funny. Like I want to like, there's like 4 things I want to talk about. I'm really, really excited, but just to touch on that, as a web designer, to hear you say you don't need a website, like I should be saying like, oh, stop it. Don't say that. But I couldn't agree more. And every single time somebody comes to me and they just launched their business, or they're still figuring out like, oh, I think I want to do a course. I'm not really sure like what that looks like yet. I always tell them like, have you sold this yet? And even if somebody says, oh no, it doesn't exist yet, so I can't sell it. You can pre-sell. You can sell the idea, because that does a few things, right? It's proof of concept. Do people believe in the solution that you offer enough to invest in that? It's like a Kickstarter, right? People believe in what you are currently creating enough that they'll give you money for it like months ahead of time. So it's not that you can't sell something that doesn't exist, but if you don't know that people want to buy it, do not invest money around creating all of these things around it that may or may not pan out long term. And I'll be like, the last thing that you need is a website. The first thing that you need is to sell it.
Excel it. Exactly. You nailed it. And it's so easy, especially, I was talking 2009, and, this is now over a decade later, where it is so easy to get lost in everything that we can do, and to get lost in the branding and the marketing and all the stuff. But yet you don't, and to your point about proof of concept, if you don't have proof of concept in any way, shape, or form from a pre-sale, from a client, from one person, then it's so easy to be distracted. And that's what happens. And your fixed mindset, your imposter loves that, because it's like, oh, Paul's not going to go out there and get a client. We're going to keep him so distracted with getting websites. And then after he gets one website, he's going to have to redo it. He's going to have to reboot it and replenish it and refresh it after about a year. And so even if he doesn't have any clients, he's still going to refresh his website. There are so many different things. Your imposter syndrome will say, see, we're going to keep you comfortable here because we don't want you to go out over here and there and get a client and stumble and fall and make mistakes. And it's very indicative in today's world. The bells and whistles are incredible, right? That we have, but you can get lost in those bells and whistles, and the bells and whistles can be so noisy you can't even get any clarity in your head about what you should be doing next.
Totally.
And we get lost in that.
Totally. And I think that's where my imposter syndrome shows up, is in like the perfectionism of creating the things. And I am a designer. And so I love to just like sit in the back end, and I'm just going to put the website, I'm just going to put the landing page together. And I'm just going to put this, I'm going to make 30 social media graphics just in case. And I'm going to make sure they're all perfect. And then I am going to have everything ready. And I'll be like, oh, I don't know if I should launch this. Let me just tweak the spacing on this. And I see it a lot in my clients where we'll set a launch date. And right before that launch date, all of a sudden, all these updates come in, and they're like, "Oh, actually, I don't know if I like that picture." And it's so many updates that we can't get them done before that launch date. And I'm like, let's look at this. Like, we can always adjust after, but you're gonna launch. Like, it's an upper limits thing, I think, and people it's subconscious, and it's very uncomfortable for people. It's uncomfortable for me. And one of the things that I found is, like, I am not the kind of person, I'm about to really out myself. I'm not the kind of person that can like remain accountable to myself. Like, I don't have a problem letting myself down, but I have a huge problem letting other people down. So like this summit, right? It was the first of anything like this that I've done. I could very well have just done it myself and never put it out there, but I brought other people in. Like, I had coaches who were participating, and I had people that were setting these dates and times aside, and I couldn't not do it. So even though I felt like, what am I doing? I had to do it because of the accountability to other people. So I'm curious, is that something that you ever like talk about, or is that, what is your experience with that kind of
But with that kind of scenario, or that kind of, what you're talking about is a solution. What you're talking about is an actual solution to how do you get unstuck about being in this distracted state all the time when you don't even know you're being distracted. You actually think you're getting stuff done because you're doing lots of stuff. And you actually can have tangible effort. You've got all your social media images, and you've got all your quotes, and you've got all that. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go back and tweak that. I think I'm going to capitalize this, do it. So you have actual tangible stuff. It's when you can break out of that. And the key is becoming aware. It's becoming aware of when you're in those states, and what do you need to do to break out of that. And what you just provided is one solution, which is to have accountability partners, to be accountable to another person or people. As you stated in terms of the summit, you're accountable for the coaches because other people are relying on you. You can't sit there and say, okay, well, the summit's going to be on this date. No, I'm going to move it to this date. I'm going to move it to that date. I'm going to move it because you have the coaches that you've enrolled and engaged. You've got the audience that is wanting the information. So absolutely. One of the things I think I did when I went on my own, and I remember I told you I kind of raised my hand out there and said, hello, can someone help me? And then I kind of became, I got into sort of a, lack of a better word, I'll call it like a mastermind group, but it wasn't necessarily just a mastermind group, because that to me actually sounds like very smart people. And I don't know if I belong in one of those, especially at that time. but it was a collection of people who kind of helped each other. And we held each other accountable. And sometimes having a third party, meaning it could be a friend, it could be a colleague, it could be whoever it might be, family member saying, is this really what you want to do? Or Paul, last week you said this, and we're noticing that this week. And I could give excuses or I could give a reason. Okay, are you really hiding behind that? Or is this definitely something that you just need to do in order to get something done? So having people, your tribe, so to speak, your community, getting a coach who can help you with holding that space for you. The coach isn't necessarily there to direct you and tell you what to do, and a taskmaster, but there can be, again, you want a thought partner who's not going to just mirror back the same thing you're saying. It's somebody who is going to ask you a question. And again, that can come from a variety of people, but a question that is going to pause you to stop and take a breath and answer authentically based on what the answer is. It's not going to be the question you ask yourself that your mind plays games with you on. And you, well, Paul, are you really doing this because you don't really want to launch this? Oh, no. I just got to get this image done. I got to do 3 more images, then I'll get it done. Those are answering myself. But if I'm answering to someone else, my thought process might be a little bit different in what comes out. And then what I mirror up in my mind. And then all of a sudden I can hear myself saying something that's a little bit different than what I talk to myself about. So what you just provided there is a perfect solution around having people in your tribe, meeting people. One person doesn't have to be, I'm an introvert. So it's not like I'm going to have tons and tons of people, but one person that can help you with that.
Absolutely. Woo. Bless you. I know you muted just in time.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I am so intrigued by the work that you do and so grateful that you do this work in the world, because I think I know there are so many people who would still be in that uncomfortable place without people like you to say, hey, it's okay. Like this is uncomfortable for a reason. And here's what your reality could be if you are willing to sort of look at this and take actions in this direction. And I'm so curious how the work that you do with perfectionism, imposter syndrome, all of these things weaves into the work that you do in terms of your leadership coaching and training.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that. Thank you for the comment. Thank you for the compliment and the insight, right? The work I do is the work I do on myself. So, I was in a program, I think it was like early 2020. And one of the statements that came out of this program was just, or this conference I attended was, my life is my marketing. And, if you think about it, it's like, what does that mean? But if you think about my life, what I've had in my life and who I am and all the successes, failures, mistakes, recognition, validation, experience, that's my marketing. So in all the companies I've worked at for 30 plus years in a variety of different roles, from individual contributor to C-suite leader, I've had you name it. I've had everything happen and I've done everything and I've made mistakes. And some of those mistakes I was aware of, some I weren't until after. I've had great successes, but you learn from those. And that becomes the mosaic of who I am as a coach. And then, fast forward to where we are today, I just look at sort of my experiences and the imposter syndrome, perfectionism, all those things that we've talked about. I deal with that all the time. I deal with imposter syndrome, all the time, but I'm able now to kind of step and say, oh, wait a minute, that's my imposter voice speaking. Cool. Okay, imposter, I've got it from here. I'll take it from here. I got it. Versus getting stuck in it and or getting bogged down in it or feeling bad about it. Not right before the pandemic shut down. I was speaking at a conference. And it was a great time speaking. I love being on stage. I'm an expressive introvert, as they say. And I got off stage and I went over to where people, the speakers were, and they're selling their books and stuff. So I have a book that I published a few years ago. And a gentleman came up and approached me and says, Paul, he goes, wow, he goes, that I really, really resonated with what you were saying up there, and how we need to find our voice, and how we need to, get our, deal with our imposter syndrome and all these things. And I said, thank you. I really appreciate that. It's a nice compliment. He says, is this your book? And of course I had my book, out there, and I go, yeah. And he goes, I'd like to buy every copy here. I want to buy every copy you've got. And I'm going to give them out to my team at the office. He was a CEO. And I had just spoken at this conference. I had just talked about imposter syndrome. This gentleman, lovely gentleman, had just complimented me on my conference, on my speaking. And in a flash second, he wanted to buy my book, and my imposter voice popped right up in my head and said, you can't let him buy the book. You are not an author. You are fake. You are a fraud. This book has been out for 5 years. You can't sell him any of this book because you are a fake and you are a fraud. Just like that. This book has been on Amazon. It has actually won awards. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. It doesn't mean, all I'm saying is there's validation of the book. But here I was, and this guy's going to buy however many copies. And my imposter voice in that moment, and this was just recent, said, you can't let him. And I'm smiling at the man across the table. I'm smiling at him. And this is going on in my head. And I just was smiling, and I thought, and I said, "Wow, thank you." And the funny part was, I wasn't thanking him, even though it sounded like I was, and I certainly had gratitude to her. I was thanking my imposter voice, because I needed to thank my imposter voice to shove it on its way, so that I could collect the books and sell every single one of them to him, and I could make sure that he got them, which I did. But when I said thank you, he goes, "Oh yeah, no problem." And I thought to myself, "Oh, I'm thanking my imposter voice." Of course, I thanked him, and by signing each book and just making sure he understood how generous and gracious he was with his offer. But it was so ironic that here I had just been speaking on it. The book has been out. I have spoken on it. I've sold the book. And in that moment, I let the little door open, and that imposter walked right in and said, no way can you let him buy 13 copies, maybe one copy, but don't make him buy 13 copies, which is what I had in my inventory left there at that conference, because you can't, you're not really an author. You're a fake. Right there. So that shows you right there. It will happen. It can happen on an ongoing basis. The late Maya Angelou, the incredible, she's just an incredible artist, but as an author, she wrote incredible literature. But she said, even on, I think it was like her 11th book, she made a comment. You'll see the quote out there if you Google it. She said something like, I've written 11 books. One of these days, I'm going to be found out. One of these days, I'm going to be found out. So she dealt with imposter syndrome. Tom Hanks, the accomplished actor, deals with imposter syndrome. Howard Schultz, who was the former CEO who built Starbucks up from what it was, dealt with imposter syndrome. So many people do. Serena Williams, the incredible tennis athlete, tennis player, and citizen of the world, deals with imposter syndrome. So it's not so much having confidence, because you can be confident. I'm a confident imposter, but it's what's going on inside and how you deal with that. I don't think anyone would say Tom Hanks is not a confident actor, or Serena Williams is not a confident athlete, but it's what's going on inside with our mind games, coming back to what you said earlier. And I think that's where we can take control of those games, and we can play the game to win versus playing the game to lose, which is what our imposter syndrome wants to do by keeping us in our box.
Holy smokes. This is amazing. You are amazing. I am so grateful that you shared with our audience today, and just for being connected with you. It's such a pleasure and such a joy to learn from you and hear your stories. And I'm sure you have so many stories to share about this for your own experience and your clients. And not that I want you to share client experiences with the podcast, but there's a confidentiality clause, I'm sure. But I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. This was I'm sure people will get a ton out of this. And if people do want to continue this conversation with you and learn more about your coaching and your programs, how can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I'm on all the social media platforms. I love to be connected with people on LinkedIn. So Paul N. Larsen. My website's paulandlarsen.com, and the new website will be coming out thanks to your wonderful artistry and your design team and what that's going to be doing. So I'm very excited about that. And that's paulandlarsen.com. They can send me an email. So I love to hear from people, so paulandlarsen.com. Twitter, Voice as a Leader. Clubhouse, Voice as a Leader. Facebook business page, Voice as a Leader. Any way, shape, or form. I just love to hear from people. So whether or not they want to know more about my services, or whether or not they just want to gab and chat about imposter syndrome, it's a fun topic in a sense. And I like to keep it fun because if you think about it, it's crazy. We have something in our heads that's telling us we have to be somebody else to be successful. I just think that's a hoot. And so it's like, there's so much to talk about when we talk about imposter syndrome that we tend to think about it as like, oh my gosh, oh no. No, it's fun. It's celebration. It means you're doing something great in your life, new in your life. So celebrate it. So I'm available any way, shape, or form for folks to connect with me.
Oh, I love that. And Paul is very responsive. Let me tell you, he will reply to you. His Instagram is amazing. You have a really active LinkedIn following, which is phenomenal. So definitely, if you're inspired by this conversation, please reach out to Paul. And he is just so much fun. I am so grateful again for your time and your energy here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Course Creators Academy podcast. Join the conversation in the Course Creators Clubhouse on Facebook. And if you love this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share the love with a 5-star review. And tag us on Instagram at pualena.co for a shout out on the next episode. And be sure to visit pualena.com for more info. Thanks again for listening.